The baby's cry sliced through the bright, polished grocery store like a crack of thunder on a clear afternoon, sharp enough to make heads turn and hearts flinch. Under the fluorescent lights, among neatly stacked fruit and shining floors, a young mother stood frozen with a trembling hand on her cart, her face pale with humiliation and exhaustion, as if the world had finally cornered her in public and refused to look away. This was not the kind of place where desperation belonged, and yet there it was, breathing hard in daylight, wrapped in a worn blanket and a woman's quiet shame. Before the story unfolds any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion in unexpected places, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel, Single Dad Diaries. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that still believe the world can be better. The mother's name was Maribel Cruz, and the baby clutched against her chest was named Elio, barely 7 months old and already learning what hunger felt like. Maribel had chosen the grocery store carefully, arriving just after noon when the sun poured generously through the wide glass windows and most people were distracted by their lists rather than each other. Daytime felt safer somehow, like pain was less visible when the world was awake. She moved slowly down the aisles, her shoes scuffed, her hair pulled back in a tired knot, counting prices in her head with the precision of someone who had learned the cost of everything the hard way. Her cart held only a few items. A small bag of rice. 1 can of soup. A loaf of discounted bread. A pack of diapers that cost more than all the food combined. Each item felt like a decision between dignity and survival. Elio's cries grew louder as Maribel reached the checkout lanes, his small face red with hunger, his body squirming as if he sensed her fear. She rocked him gently, whispering comfort into his hair, but the sound echoed anyway, drawing glances that burned more than the hunger itself. People noticed. Some looked away quickly, uncomfortable with suffering they hadn't scheduled into their day. Others stared too long, eyes full of judgment dressed up as concern. A cashier shifted impatiently. A manager whispered to an employee near the register, casting quick looks in Maribel's direction. She could feel the moment building, that terrible point where someone would ask a question she couldn't answer or tell her she needed to leave. Her chest tightened. She hadn't eaten since the night before. Her rent was overdue. The job interviews hadn't called back. She was trying. God knew she was trying. Across the store, near the organic produce display, a young man stood watching without fully understanding why his feet had stopped moving. His name was Adrian Vale, 24 years old, dressed simply despite the wealth that followed his last name like a shadow. He was the son of one of the richest men in the city, raised in penthouses and private schools, his life cushioned by abundance he had never earned. He had come to the store on a whim, avoiding a meeting, craving normalcy, wanting to feel like just another person buying groceries in the middle of the day. Adrian noticed Maribel not because she was poor, but because something about the way she held her baby struck him with unexpected force. There was no performance in her struggle, no plea for attention, only a quiet endurance that felt heavier than noise. He saw her count bills twice. He saw her hesitate over the diapers. He saw her shoulders sag when Elio cried again, as if each sound was an apology she was too tired to make. Adrian's childhood flashed briefly in his mind, images of nannies and chauffeurs, of never needing to choose between food and anything else. He remembered his father's lectures about self-made success, about strength and independence, about how help spoiled people. He also remembered his mother's absence, gone too early, leaving behind a house full of silence and money that could not explain itself. Standing there in daylight, surrounded by abundance, Adrian felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. A sense that life had divided people unfairly, and he had been standing on the easier side without ever questioning the line. At the checkout, Maribel's worst fear arrived quietly. The total rang up higher than what she had in her hand. The cashier repeated the amount, slower this time, louder, as if volume could bridge the gap between numbers and reality. Maribel swallowed hard, her face burning. She asked to remove the soup. Then the bread. Then, with a shaking breath, she reached for the diapers, her fingers lingering as if hoping they might magically become affordable if she held them long enough. Elio cried harder, sensing the tension, his small body arching. The line behind them grew restless. Someone sighed. Another person muttered about people bringing babies into stores. The manager stepped closer. Maribel felt the walls closing in, the humiliation pressing down until it was hard to breathe. She was about to apologize, to scoop up her baby and leave everything behind, when a shadow fell across the counter. Adrian stepped forward, his heart pounding louder than the baby's cries. In that moment, something inside him made a decision before his mind could catch up. He placed his card on the counter, his hand steady despite the storm in his chest. The cashier hesitated, surprised, then processed the payment. The sound of approval beeped softly, almost shyly, like it didn't want to interrupt the moment. Maribel looked up, stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. She shook her head instinctively, pride and fear warring inside her, but Adrian met her gaze with calm resolve. There were no speeches, no dramatic gestures, only a simple act that felt enormous in its timing. The manager stepped back. The line fell silent. The groceries were bagged, but Adrian didn't stop there. As Maribel gathered her things, he made a choice that shocked even himself. He asked the cashier to add a few more items. Fresh fruit. Baby formula. A warm rotisserie chicken. Enough to last more than a day. Enough to say this wasn't just about the moment, but about dignity. The total climbed, but Adrian didn't flinch. For the first time in his life, money felt like what it was always supposed to be, a tool, not a wall. Tears slid down Maribel's face as she clutched Elio closer, her shoulders shaking with a release she hadn't allowed herself in months. She tried to speak, but emotion tangled her words. Adrian simply nodded, offering a small, respectful smile, then stepped aside as if he were the one receiving a gift. The store seemed brighter suddenly, the daylight warmer, the air less heavy. A few people wiped their eyes. Others looked thoughtful, ashamed, inspired. Outside, the afternoon sun wrapped the parking lot in gold. Maribel sat on a bench, catching her breath, feeding Elio from a bottle she could finally afford. Adrian lingered nearby, unsure why he hadn't left yet. When he finally walked past, he left behind a folded card tucked discreetly into one of the grocery bags, not with his name or title, but with information about a foundation he had quietly started months earlier and never spoken about, meant to support single parents with childcare and job placement. He had always intended it to be his rebellion against a legacy of distance. Today, it finally felt real. In the weeks that followed, Maribel's life did not magically become easy, but it became possible. The foundation helped her secure part-time work and reliable childcare. Elio gained weight, his cries turning into laughter. Maribel's posture changed, her eyes carrying less fear and more resolve. She never forgot that afternoon, the way kindness had found her in the middle of her worst day, in the middle of the day itself, under unforgiving lights that suddenly felt merciful. For Adrian, the moment rewrote something deep within him. He stopped chasing approval from a father who measured worth in profit margins. He invested his time, not just money, into the foundation, visiting centers, listening to stories, learning names. The grocery store became a quiet landmark in his mind, a place where he had finally chosen the kind of man he wanted to be, not because he was rich, but because he was human. Stories like this remind us that change doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks into a grocery store at noon, hears a baby cry, and decides to act. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Single Dad Diaries so we can continue telling stories that matter. And before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with the word kindness and tell us where you're watching from. Your words help this message travel further than we ever could alone, because somewhere, right now, under the bright lights of an ordinary day, someone is standing on the edge of hope, waiting for a stranger to remind them they are not invisible.